Three, two, one. Oh my god. He's literally me. I have no other intro planned. Hello, everybody,
I,
and welcome.
Well, that's
you, you should have followed that up with Borat's not.
Not. Yeah.
he is not to me.
It's not the
He is
literally not
he,
me
he is
trilogy.
not very nice.
That is not my wife. Dancing with another wife.
This isn't my beautiful house.
No, yeah. This isn't my beautiful
Oh,
house or my yeah, I don't have teeth like that. I never went to
Oh
a photo
God.
booth. What are you guys talking about? I'm your host
well,
Ian
so
Taylor, and join me tonight is my co-host Devin King,
Hey.
and whose birthday it is, or at least around this time, our good friend, American filmmaker Stephen Beeson. How are you guys doing?
it was my birthday. Let's see, 21 days ago. So,
Groundhog Day.
Good
Well,
memory.
so but
how many Groundhog Days have you been through since then, Steven?
well, it's I can be one of those insufferable 30-year-old women who's like, it's my birthday month.
Oh no.
That's how I am in August.
Or
Exactly,
you could
exactly.
be, or you could say it's Aquarius season.
Okay.
This is our friend Aaron
Even
Kramers from
worse.
Nova Scotia, artist and filmmaker alike. Say hi,
Yeah.
Aaron.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. I will be talking about Naked. Oh
Which
shit! I spoiled it. I spoiled it.
it's quite all right. I mean, it is
It's a good
in the video
segue.
This is
description
this,
and all that.
this is a show
Uh,
where we bear all. But yeah, no. Well, we'll ping you later, Aaron, when we get to that film. But anyway,
yes. No. So I mean, this was an episode of my own idea. I can't take full credit because I think Devin and I were just talking about off the air. This is kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different ideas and really just a collection of films that we've all kind of wanted to talk about for a long time. And we kind of noticed that maybe there's some similarities here. And
better for worse.
for better or worse. And I
This is
think,
why we
I
have
think,
the really long essay-like titles. We had
yeah,
a Fragile Egos trilogy at one point with Buffalo 66. We had a Naked trilogy with Naked Lunch, and Naked Gun, which would have been a wild
A
ride to say
fever
the
trip.
least.
Yeah.
But
a nudist trilogy, yes.
all of us have been advocating for certain films. Steven has been pushing the conformist for the longest time. I'm very curious to hear why soon. But this is why we have kind of a hodgepodge of different things here.
Well, and I will say this. I mean, I think there is uh I think there is a theme here. I mean, the surface level theme of, cautionary tales of, toxic men and all of this and, not literally me.
Well,
But
it's
I think
we're taking the whole literally me theme that people associate with like Ryan Gosling films or guys that relate to troubled protagonists, and this is sort of taking that to its limit.
well,
This
and
is
and
this is
one thing
where
that
I
I
would
will say
advocate checking yourself before wrecking yourself.
Well, it all
Before
well,
started because there were some memes, like unironically, about characters like Tyler Durden and Patrick Bateman from American
oh
Psycho,
yeah, and
and
now
the
Homelander.
protagonist of ironically naked,
oh God.
unironically like connecting to these characters. And I'm not trying to judge or anything like that. Maybe there's like smaller aspects of the character that you relate to, but if you relate to them on a fundamental level, I'm sorry,
I,
buddy.
at this point, it's like you really should examine why you connect to these characters and
Exactly.
fine.
And
Which we're
what
going to
you
do
can
tonight.
improve upon yourself.
Oh yeah.
Well, and here's the thing, and I think this is maybe a deeper sort of connection that I notice between all of these films, and beyond just kind of the surface level meme ability. But I think all of these characters throughout all of these films, specifically the protagonists, they're all sort of yearning for some source of or some sort of normalcy, some sort of uh, something that is like the stereotypical, white picket fence, 2.5
Nuclear
children,
family.
this
Yeah.
nuclear family, this kind of idea of normalcy, and you might even say conformity. And
Holy shit. That was good.
I
and
think
with
these are all
that,
people that find themselves outside of the norm that are yearning for some sense of stability, perhaps, or some sense in their lives,
Some
because
purpose. Yeah.
they've become very misguided otherwise.
yes. And on that note, we introduce the first film of tonight. This is Bernardo Bertolucci's Il Conformista, or The Conformist. So this is an Italian film. It is based on the 1951 novel The Conformist of the same name by Alberto Moravia. It stars Jean-Louis. There's a bunch of Italian actors in this. I'm not going to try and butcher their
Oh,
names.
come on, try it.
You don't have to try very hard to butcher the name.
Trintignant, Stefania Sandrelli, Gaston Mochon,
Sound
spaghetti
French
and
now.
meatballs.
Moron.
Co-production of Italy, French, West Germany. And what is the film about? Well, it is a film about a young man who is swept up in fascist Italy, um, becomes a soldier in Mussolini's army during the 1930s. He is married to, or about to marry, a young, ditzy sort of young woman who he really does not have a connection to in the way that I think he would want to. Or should, maybe. And he's kind of struggling with his own sexuality, his own place in the world, and this is about his life and a mission that he sent to assassinate a former college professor of his who has taken refuge in Paris, who is now an anti-fascist renegade sort of rebel. And this is a classic film. This was, I believe it was the second feature film by Bertolucci. Bertolucci, most people, I think, are probably familiar with him for Last Tango in Paris, which we don't have the time to get into, but a very, very controversial film. He was also an Academy Award winner for the last Emperor. Yes, he was a protege of Pasolini, who made Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom. Yes. So Bertolucci, obviously having some familiarity with Italy and this sort of, era in history, this sort of culture. This is a heavy film. It's very dark. It's it's
all's aligned with the theme tonight.
Yeah, no,
fairness.
It's one of those that's hard to even talk about. I mean, I will say that this was actually shot by the same cinematographer who would later go on to do Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
Which is a connection because, I mean, there's some shots in here of rustling leaves amidst kind of there's a landscape shot with some rustling leaves that would later be used as kind of an homage in Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, there's a few Godfather vibes in this. I think one of the actors in this was in the Godfather Part 2. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, this is one of those films that you hear people like the Coen brothers talk about, you hear people like Spielberg talk about, you hear people like Coppola talk about. I actually learned of this film through Paul Schrader's Facebook page.
Of
um,
course.
Based.
and his love of this film, and but for all of the sort of filmmakers that we admire and we kind of look up to, and their relationship with this film, I think it's not really talked about as much as it deserves to be, because I think it's just a brilliant, uh, masterful piece of cinematic history, and I'm actually very curious to hear you guys' thoughts on it.
Well, I will say this off the bat, I definitely shouldn't have waited last minute to watch it because it was a
Yeah,
lot to take in. So
yes, it is.
my thoughts are really unprocessed, and I feel like I missed on a lot of maybe the the underlying themes that give context. Like I realize there's themes of fascism and communism and all this, and political allegiance, and this person's just trying to go with the flow of what's happening without questioning it too much, and
Yeah,
the problems that come with that. And it was a real, like, breathtaking, film in a lot of scenes. I love the cinematography. That whole one area that they go to where he's talking to the person in the straitjacket, or who goes in the straitjacket
Oh
with
yeah.
that beautiful
his
white mark.
father.
His father, yeah, that was
Yeah.
his father. I I really shouldn't have watched this last minute,
It's a
Well,
but
lot to
well,
man,
and,
take in.
and see,
Yeah.
here's the thing. I mean,
beautiful scenery.
Mhm.
no, I agreed to introduce this film, and then it's like I go to introduce it, and it's like there's a lot to unpack. I mean, it's I get where you're coming from. It's one of those
Yeah.
films that I think.
I feel like I really need context to really be able to speak on it, or other than just my initial impressions. But I do think that it is a very nuanced film that really dives into a very complex and what was probably in the vein of. I mean, I guess this takes place many decades after the events occurred, but this was like right in the ether, right in the zeitgeist, and so taking on a film like this is no small feat, and
Absolutely.
Well,
it's very admirable just for that.
I will say there was an article by Vox, Vox Media, and it was a an article about how that the conformist still resonates today. And so I think, if you read that article, they kind of talk about, the things that are throughout the film, the sort of allegory of Plato's cave, and, this idea of, young men who kind of get swept up into these extremist political movements, which, is very prevalent today, maybe not to the sort of dramatic length of this film, but maybe it just starts out, you're sharing some edgy memes, and then next thing you know, you're down a path that you don't really want to be. I think that there is some truth to this film even today, and I think that there's some beauty in that, and some sort of um, there's something timeless about that, but it's also
Timeless and
un-
horrific, I think. Just
well, it's unfortunate how relevant it still is.
Mhm.
You
oh
know,
yeah,
Yeah,
because
there's
I
a
it,
lot
think a
of
lot of
people
it's
people
like
just
that.
find
Yeah.
themselves in these political movements, and they feel like they don't have a choice but to go along with what's happening, or they end up being like morally bankrupt. They don't really have the perspective
because
outside of the time they're
they
in.
think that that's the only option they have,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and I mean, I feel like I feel like this film does a brilliant job uh, in yeah I feel like it sets out to accomplish a very specific thing, and I think it does it masterfully.
Yeah, like it's the
You were
conviction in the character that makes him so compelling and kind of scary. Like he's constantly put into situations where he doesn't really have to do what he's told. Like, he's in a completely different country, surrounded by people that are more or less willing to protect him, and but he just sticks to his ideals time and time and time again, just
It's like
because he's afraid of shattering that kind of viewpoint. And that's
he's
kind of
just
what it's
doing his
frustrating.
job.
Exactly. He's just
Well,
doing his job, but
there's
he doesn't really have to, but he's so convinced that he has to, that makes it more compelling than, say,
Yeah,
like somebody was just threatened by a mustache twirling villain, or somebody was held hostage and forced to do it. Like, that would have really taken away from the point, I think. I feel like a lot of Hollywood movies would probably do something
no,
stupid
and
like that.
I mean, in a way, and they kind of touched on this in the article too. It's like we have to believe this character when he tells you who he is, and it's like you want to believe that at some point he's going to sort of walk away and make the right decision, and they almost make you believe that for like half a second, but
It's too late at that point.
it's
Yeah.
too late at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and when he does walk
There's
away
the
at the
whole
end, like, it's so unsatisfying because he picked the wrong time to do it. Like, this decision needed to happen years ago, and he's kind of feeling this like unbearable guilt on him at the end of the movie, which I think that's what the ending represented. Was like, yeah, sure, you kind of accepted who you really were, but at what cost? Like, after all of the pain you've put people through, after all of the years like living a lie, like you might as well just be consumed by that lie, because it doesn't really matter anymore at that point.
And that is an incredibly nihilistic statement for a film like this to make. But I feel like
Hmm.
I
There's
feel
a lot
like
of truth
we
in it.
need
Like
no,
that,
there is
yeah.
truth in it. And I feel like we need films like this, especially today where it's like there's a different kind of conformity where it's like every sort of film that comes out is very safe and sterile. And this is a film that is really wrestling with some ugly themes, and it's doing so in a way that is
Yeah.
honest and horrific.
But it's also tasteful.
Yeah.
Like, it never felt like it was
No,
divulging into torture porn, which was
no, it's
really,
not
really refreshing.
exploitive.
Yeah. Like, I absolutely love this movie. Like, it's just what
Yes.
I've kind of mentioned my comments about like how French cinema can feel like very cynical and very like they think they're above the medium they're pushing. When you watch an Italian movie, it you don't feel anything but an adulterated love for cinema. Even in the neorealist movement, like, yeah, that was
Oh
more of
yeah.
an attack on Hollywood, but it wasn't an attack on cinema. They just wanted to use cinema to tell stories in a
Uh,
different way, but the passion is still there. You can
this
feel
film
it.
definitely you can feel like the roots of it being in Italian neorealism. I mean, maybe it's a little more
Mhm.
elevated in some sense, but
It's a good
it
combination.
but you can tell that they are striving for that kind of tone. Like one film that
Absolutely.
I am a huge fan of that I think more people should see that we should talk about at some point is Bicycle Thieves. That's really
Hmm.
probably the most popular of
Yes.
the Italian neorealist films, and I really have to see some other ones as well. But
Umberto
you
D
can
is very good. Yeah.
you can definitely tell that he's probably still in that vein when expressing this film, but going for even broader themes
Yeah, he's
and
still in
more
that vein,
difficult.
Well, and
but like he gives it an
It's
the
artistic
very
flair. Yeah.
difficult and nuanced subject matter that not everyone knows what the right thing to do is, and even when you do, not everyone has the confidence or ability to act on it.
well, and the camera work is calling attention to itself. Like it's very like there's a deep understanding of the technicality, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
not doing so in a way that is overly flashy. I look at someone like Gaspar Noé, and there's a lot of times where I watch his films, and it's like I feel like a lot of his camera stuff kind of borders on masturbatory,
Oh yeah.
and, and this is more. This has just as much technicality and craft, but it's somehow more honest.
Hmm.
Um,
It's a good
It
yeah.
feels very poignant and very grounded in what the story is
and it
trying to
feels
convey.
purposeful. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at these low camera angles and the tracking shots and the Dutch angles, and I mean it doesn't feel like it's there for stylistic, just empty sort of style. Like
It was
there is a
thought put into
panache to
every
it
shot.
that,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, it complements it.
Yeah, and it
The
kind of
style
fits.
is complementing the substance.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
fits the narrative of like a guy trying to live a stable life in such a cruel and unforgiving and messy world. Like the styles kind of work in that sense where the more stylistic nature of it reflects his viewpoint, whereas like the realist elements of it, like the worn down scenery and the heavy subject matter, feel more like the world just kind of bearing him down and not really like
Well,
allowing
and
him.
sure, and I mean even down to the scenes where it's like, Devin was talking about where he visits his father. Um, there's
Such a
this.
brutal scene. Fuck.
It's no, it's incredibly brutal, but the way that in that scene and several scenes after that, I think on the train ride as well, there's these little slats of light. I don't know
Mm.
if you guys noticed this, but there's like this symbolism and this thematic imagery of bars over all of the characters,
Yes.
as if he's trapped, like he's committed to this lie that it's suffocating him.
I think the moment that won me over the most, I have to be honest. When I first saw the childhood flashback, I was like, "Oh no, are we gonna do the sad childhood trauma cliche?" Like I was so nervous. I'm like, "Movie,
No,
come on!"
it
But that's not what it is. That's not what it is. What it is exploring how the character has to convince himself that the issue behind the traumatic experience was not the real problem. He had to warp it into his point of view. Like, oh, the issue was the fact that like he was gay and being gay is wrong. Not the issue that the man was a pedophile or the man was abusing his power as a fascist soldier. No, clearly the issue was that he was gay, and I have to convince myself that my childhood trauma happened a certain way. And that's so much more interesting than just the whole like "don't you feel
no,
bad" spiel. A lot of like this that
no,
trope
and
is often used for.
I don't think that the film is. I mean, it's portraying it in a sort of humanist way, but I don't think that the film is ever inviting sympathy for this guy.
Absolutely not.
It's
Which I respect.
it,
Yeah.
no,
Like we
exactly,
understand why
It's
he's a
like
certain way, but it
it,
never
it makes for it
excuses
makes
him.
for a better character study, but it also puts him at kind of like an arm's length. Like when I was watching the film, I wasn't sure how it really fit into this trilogy, um, which is odd because it's about conformity. But it's like I don't really feel a connection with this guy. But the more I watch his actions, it's like okay, maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe we're watching how well. In some subtle ways, I think we do kind of lie to ourselves about what happened to us and try to justify acting or behaving in a certain way in order to fit in rather than, you know, stand out and be ridiculed kind of thing. So in very subtle ways, that kind of behavior does permeate a little bit, even in just day-to-day life. And
no, and that's kind of what I was talking about. I mean, nowadays it's this sort of fringe political movements that are spread through memes. I mean, you know the medium has changed, and maybe it's not as dramatic as being hired to go kill someone that you loved in a political assassination, but there's still this element of people, specifically young men, who kind of get swept up into these ideas, and they're looking for this sense of community and this sense of identity,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I think the
it's
worst of it
tragic.
is like he clearly abuses like this mindset to like for his own advantage. Like I think the scene with trees was like the first good example of that, where like he was like clearly sleeping with his mother, and he like clearly wasn't a fan of that just because like he wants his mother to kind of like be lonely and not really be attached to anybody, so he could be more attached to him basically. And like he with the guard, he kind of makes up this bullshit. It's like, oh, trees. Like who calls your kid trees? Like that's gotta be like a foreign dialect or something along those lines. And like he's this and he's that. Like just making up this total complete bullshit to like spin like the lies and the culture to his advantage. And there's so many people like that. Like even not just like on the Republican side of things, but even like the liberal side of things. Like people are just kind of manipulating information to get what they want. for their own like
Oh,
selfish
for
reasons, and
sure.
that was just sickening. Although I will say, like I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but the slapping made me laugh a little bit. Like that's probably just a cultural thing, 100%. But it caught me
Wait,
off
so
guard. Just we
so
just
wait,
start slapping.
well, which part?
Yeah,
When
the
the guy,
security guard
yeah.
was taking care of trees. Like I thought they were just gonna drive away. No, he fucking slaps
No,
the
he
shit out of
killed.
him.
No, I think he killed that guy.
I think he
You
killed
know,
him too, but for like the first point, he starts slapping him across the face to like beat him up a little bit. But I don't know if that's just
yeah.
like a sign of disrespect in their culture, and
I
it's just kind of funny from a Western viewpoint. So
well,
I don't hold it
it
against the
could
film; it just
be.
made me laugh.
Maybe it was nervous laughter. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's
Oh, that
also.
too. Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, the other thing is, I'm fairly certain that was, you know, a very racially motivated hate crime as well, which
Absolutely.
makes it that
Yeah.
much more uncomfortable. I mean, you literally have at one point there's a character who's like, you know, we just need to take these homosexuals and Jews and line them against a
Oh
wall.
God, yeah,
Like, holy
that
shit,
guy.
you
I
know?
yeah, Jesus. I think he
It,
played a really bad guy in The Godfather Part 2 as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
I
he's
mean
just
that
like really
that
good at playing the detestable characters. But what's fucked up is that like he also has a sense of humanity about him. Like, you know, like he
yeah.
gets tired. There's a scene where he's in the park and it's actually kind of funny where he's just like, ah, I'm tired, I'm bored, like can I just go home? Can I get something to eat? Like it's freezing out here. Can we go already? And like again, I love that touch because it makes it more grounded and human and more scary. Like it shows that anybody can become like these kind of characters.
Well, and that's, I mean, especially too, it's like, you know, it's weird to think that, you know, even today, it's like, you know, your grandpa, you know, could say something that out of touch and dated and cringe or you know, racist or whatever, and it's like,
Okay,
you know what I
grandpa.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre, but it's like that's part of that sort of generational traditionalism and you know, conformity, this sort of idea of the nuclear family that's kind of permeated, you know, that generation and throughout history. And it's like I think it does make it real because in a way, you know, we probably know somebody like that cranky
100%.
old guy, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, we
It's
probably know
horrific.
somebody who's just like, oh, I didn't have a choice. But even though, like, in reality, maybe they did. And they just didn't know it because their mindset
Or
told
maybe
them
they
not to.
did know it and they chose to lie to themselves, you know.
Exactly, because they were scared of the outcome. Yeah, but there's also,
Yeah.
like, the characters in general, I thought were. There was a review I read on Letterboxd that complained that all of the characters felt the same. I will respectfully disagree with that wrong opinion because the characters were so like interesting and vivid and unique and like there was a quote that David Lean said in an interview, the director of Lawrence of Arabia, that like I want to write characters I love to have dinner with and maybe behind protective glass, but these characters are so fascinating that I want to have dinner with all of them. I mean that as a compliment, you know, besides the two women attractive, but like all of the
I mean,
characters are great
besides
and
the
hearing about
fascist
yeah.
hate crime committing
Well,
murderers,
I
yeah.
mean, I mean, I'd have dinner with him behind like closed bars and get him arrested
Sure,
afterwards.
sure,
But
sure.
I like to pick aspirin a little bit. But every character just has a rich sense of history, and like they all have very different like costume designs, very different emotions, very different body language, which I particularly liked. Like I like how like his wife was like more loose and kind of limber and very messy, whereas like the other girl was kind of like I kind of saw like the wife was like more uncomfortable with her body language, whereas the blonde one was more comfortable with that kind of style of body language, and that tells us
Well, and it,
everything we need to know that like the blonde woman is used to like this loose lifestyle, whereas the wife wants to live that kind of lifestyle, but she's constantly held back by her husband, and that's such. I love it when little details like that can tell us everything we need to know about a character, and every character felt like
oh yeah,
that. Man.
and I mean the sort of, you know, the culture clash of sort of
Mm.
more liberal, sexually, yeah. I mean that whole Paris sort of girl boss culture. It's just this
Yeah,
very
two women
rich
can
brand.
dance in Paris is not really a big deal. Like, I love the scene where he's like, the main character's like, "Aren't you gonna stop him?" To the professor, and he's just like, "Why? Like, they're
They're
dancing. It's
having
fine.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah, they're having
It's
fun.
like
Like, who cares?"
he might have a tinge of jealousy or something, even though he's sleeping with both of them.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
and I think it's also not just the jealousy, but I mean I think it's some like bizarre sort of maybe internalized homophobia as well. It's
Oh,
there's this whole
100%. Yeah,
yeah.
Mhm.
but he's
Um.
absolutely projecting. Like, even at the end,
Oh, for
Oh
probably the
yeah.
sure.
saddest scene where he like calls out like his friend, the blind guy, was one
Mhm.
of my favorite characters, and
I I
even
I
yeah.
will I will say all the main protagonists in all three of the films we are reviewing tonight, I think they could open a movie theater together because they are excellent at projecting.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I'd say
Oh
all these
man.
characters would, but that's a discussion for later.
Yeah.
And he's just like,
It,
And
I
some of them
he's a
behind the
fascist. He's
scenes
a
as well.
pedophile. Like, you gotta arrest him. He's killed people. But it's like, he's clearly just hates himself. And he needs to put that in other people. And I
oh
particularly
yeah.
like how he saw, like, other people. Like, he's just like, you look just like a hooker I used to meet. And she's like, I don't really know what you're talking about. Or the guy at the end where he's like, were you an officer with long hair that protected me as a kid? He's like, dude, like, I don't even know you. Like, he has to project these
Well, and
people onto complete strangers because he
it's
needs something to
it's
vent at.
also, I mean, it's also narcissism. It's
Ooh
this
yeah.
kind of
Yep.
this sense of you know that the most important thing that the people around me ever did was meet me. You know,
Hmm. No,
how
yeah,
does this? Yeah,
I think narcissism is definitely a huge theme for tonight as well. Particularly vulnerable narcissism, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, he's
yeah.
clearly very spoiled. Like, he lives in a luxurious mansion with a gorgeous wife, and he also lives in a country that's like at the time was dealing with poverty like big time, and he's just so
Well, and
disconnected from
that's
that world. And I kind of like how they don't just cut away to a random character's perspective to show like, oh, like the poor are suffering and crumbling, because he would never see that kind of world until the end. And I love how that respect to detail and perspective that some other movies might be more tempted to break.
yeah. No, and I mean, it's also the very few interactions that he has with sort of the lower class. I mean, the girl selling violets. It's like
Hmm.
And the fact that it's
the,
like clearly having an affair with the maid and the wife. It's kind of subtly
no, yeah,
implied that the wife knows about it when she asks for the flowers just to give it back to the maid. Ugh.
yeah. No, it's heartbreaking, and I mean, I personally, I mean, I feel like this is one of those films that I could gush about all night. I
Me
feel
too.
like it is truly a masterpiece in the purest sense of the word. I think that this is one of those few films that, from everything down to the cinematography, the characterization, the plot, the
Music.
performances, the score. The
Ooh.
score is phenomenal. Um, I think this is basically perfect. I have very few, if any, complaints. I mean, it was a film that and I put this in my review the first time I watched it. It's like a very few times do I watch a film and it almost immediately jumps into my top 10. And I
Wow.
think this is one of those films.
Whew.
It's a definitely a film I have to revisit
Yep.
under better circumstances to really fully appreciate. Um, but I do recognize the masterwork that went behind it, and I do think if I just read a little more on the context of the history of what's going on, I could get more from it. But I do recognize, just even on the surface, that it is a masterfully done piece of cinema. So I'm gonna give it a pretty solid 7. I'm not even gonna go with the joke answer.
Ooh, damn.
I
I'm saving that for later, but it's a solid 7, and
uh,
it could definitely go up from there on
Nice.
a revisit. want to revisit?
If I had to nitpick, like, it's hard. Like, the only thing I could really nitpick, and Steven, I can't stress enough how much of a nitpick this is that sometimes like the style and substance isn't like 100% concrete. Like there were a few points. Again, this is probably a product of its time experimental thing where there were a few points where there was an actor like very awkwardly entering the scene and being like, I gotta get to this position and strike a pose, and I don't know, it felt like a little off in that sense at points, and again, like the slapping was unintentionally funny, and there's like it's product of its time stuff. It can't help like some weird ADR, but yeah, that's about it. Like I really have to struggle. The Italians know how to do it, man. Like that's all I'm gonna say. 9.7 out of 10.
I'm giving this a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, nice, very nice. Speaking of very nice,
Oh boy.
we have a film that's the polar opposite of nice.
Oh god.
So Naked, starring Marlon Wayans. It's about a guy that keeps waking up in an elevator, but the trick is he's naked every time he wakes up, and it's like Groundhog Day and the day. We're talking about Naked with Marlon Wayans, right? They watched the right movie. What?
Very
God
funny.
Damn it!
Very
I'm fucking with you guys. Naked by Mike Lee, aka the film I've been constantly putting off because I simultaneously wanted to see it and never wanted to see it because it looked horrible. Not because it looked like a bad movie, but because it is very, very troublesome, very heavy subject matter. It's a British black comedy from the great Mike Lee, behind such films like Secrets and Lies, Life is Sweet, Happy Go Lucky. I've seen Secrets and Lies, which is a fantastic movie we should definitely talk about on the podcast at some point, but I haven't seen his other films. From the impression I'm getting, he has not made films quite as fucked up as this one. So this is centered around a character played by David Thewlis. Absolutely wonderful actor. Not get ready to leave
Which
just yet.
this is the film that also put him on the map, by the way, or like at least in terms of us skyrocketing to popularity. And it's funny he ends up being a werewolf in the Harry Potter films
because he's basically a werewolf in this. Like there's like actually like a werewolf fan theory about this movie because like he usually only ever goes out at night. Like he's at his worst when he's out at night and there's a moon in the background.
So
he's very hunched over, very dirty, very.
So what's the story about, Ian?
So what's the story about? Yes, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this opens up with Johnny Fletcher. I'm just gonna say pulling off an awful act, and this essentially sends him on the run. He gets chased away, goes on the run, stays with a few friends, gets kicked out by a few friends, stays with another few friends. Basically, kind of goes on this journey where he meets a lot of problematic people, equally problematic people, a lot of interesting characters. It's basically kind of like a strange odyssey of sorts where it's not so much a self-discovery story as much as it's we're discovering more about this.
This is what I'll say, is that David Thewlis is this very much vagabond character. He kind of is very impulsive and he goes on instinct. This film opens up with a very uncomfortable sex scene that may have started off consensually, but definitely doesn't end up that way. And if that isn't bad enough, you keep watching the movie and you just find out this guy is really just a big mean jerk.
He's a big bully. You can't just bang at someone's wall.
The more I don't like him.
And
here's the thing, and I think it's funny because we didn't say this about the movie dealing with the horrors of fascist Italy, but maybe if you're turned off by certain subjects, sexual assault, maybe don't listen to this part of the podcast. This is a very brutal film.
Probably don't watch the movie.
Yeah.
This
is
just don't watch it at all. Yeah, this is very graphic, and so this is my first introduction to Mike Lee.
Same.
This is Jesus. I mean, this is
Well,
Uh,
I have a funny story just before you go, Steven, because I know this is your first time seeing it. This is my second time or maybe third time seeing this film. I picked it up at a Salvation Army. I found it on VHS back when I was like maybe 17, which is a bit young to have seen this film. Jesus Christ. And there were some elements to it that I weirdly connected to, although at an arm's length. I mean, obviously, your main protagonist is opening up with the grape scene at the very beginning. I'm not even into. I'm not even into vinery or whatever. This movie,
boo.
in a sense, has aged like fine wine, though. Like, so coming
uh,
back to this film, there were some things that I noticed that uh, um, definitely should have been more obvious to me when I was, like, younger, but, it was just surreal coming back to this and seeing it. I felt like it was important for me to see it again and to distance myself further from it. But, yeah, damn. So just a little bit about my kind of experience into this. This is a guy who very much runs an impulse, and I've known people that are like this, and it really hit hard when I found out that he's, like, the same age as I am currently in this movie.
yeah. Um,
But,
well,
anyway, Steven,
here's the
this is your first time seeing this film. What was your initial impression?
well, I mean, I will say this, if this movie was actually, just a documentary and David Thewlis had actually done all of these awful things, it would still only be the second worst thing that someone who worked on Harry Potter has done.
Oh
No,
god.
no, I'm
Ah,
sorry.
fuck you.
I had to sneak that
Fuck you.
J.K. Rowling dig in there. No, so Jesus, here's the thing about this film, and I have to confess, I watched this film. It is the entire Criterion Collection edition rip of this film is available on YouTube of all places, which is funny because you'll see people talk about movies like this and they'll be like, "Oh, I can't really show a clip because I'll get demonetized," and it's like, well, the whole movie's on there.
It just
Yeah.
Absolute
flew under the
Chad.
Yes.
radar. I watched it on the Criterion Channel because I have a subscription.
Okay. Well, but anyway, I was watching this, and it's funny because the comments they were kind of comparing it. There was one comment in particular that was comparing it favorably to Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver,
Mm.
and I think that there's some truth in that comparison. I don't think that this film is as good as Taxi Driver, and I'm
I
gonna
mean,
get
not many
into
films are, in fairness.
no. I mean that's true, but I'll get into why specifically I think that later. Um, but I do see some similarities. This sort of lonely drifter, this complete misogynist and awful, just rotten, person. This man who's kind of drifting from place to place, and it's like the city is almost a character in and of itself, and so there's definitely some similarity there. But one of the reasons that I think that I'm gonna rate this a little lower than Taxi Driver, and I can go ahead and say this: Taxi Driver. There's something about Travis Bickle where you're watching him, and there's a moment where you start to see through his lies. Right? There's a moment where the jig is up. He's revealing himself to you, and you can't look away. You can't, because throughout the beginning of that film you want to believe that maybe he is misunderstood, maybe society is sort of mistreating him, and he has this very sort of narcissistic personality, and being an unreliable narrator, you almost want to believe his version. Naked, this is a guy who is completely upfront with what a piece of shit he is.
Well, I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
going for
It's
something different. Like, I don't know if I
no,
agree
no, it is. But
entirely.
here's the thing, and this is the only thing I'll say. The difference for me is I think I would rewatch Taxi Driver because there is that sort of intrigue and that mystery and like that moment. But I feel like this is a film that I'm glad to have seen, but I don't know when I would rewatch it because I don't enjoy spending time with this character. He is a character who I'll use an expression that my mother used for,
He's a
for
meanie.
many. No. I mean, my
Please
mother
don't
said
tell me you
this.
showed her the movie.
No. My mother said this about someone like this character years ago, and I kept coming back to this while I was watching the film. He's the kind of guy who sucks the air out of a room.
Yep,
Oh yeah.
'It's
100%. They
just
take advantage of that
it
too.
it's a good movie, but this character, as good of a character study as it is, it's exhausting. It is really, truly exhausting to sit with this person for so long.
Well,
It
yeah.
is an absolutely suffocating experience. And I don't know if it's even fair for me to hold that against the film because maybe they're just doing such a good job
Yeah,
at
100%.
setting this guy up. But it's, my God, I by the end of it, I truly hated him.
You
Oh
just
yeah.
want a
And
package of cigarettes, yeah.
I
well,
just want to punch the shit out of him.
I
which
mean, someone does.
to be fair, he does get the shit kicked out of him, and he definitely
No, and
deserves it
it's
at that point.
deserved. It's
A 100%,
It's
yeah.
very much deserved. Although arguably, and I don't want to split hairs here, but there is another character in there that may be slightly worse, but
Yep.
for different reasons. But they're both miserable pieces of shit for different reasons. But effectively, they do the same thing. Um,
well, and I wonder.
there's the landlord who doesn't really
Yes.
have I mean he has deep-seated problems, but he's not like homeless out in the street. He's a landlord that
Very
loves
manipulative.
taking advantage of people, especially in bed, and it's
Well,
horrific to see. Where the
and
other
here's
guy
the thing.
is,
I wondered
uh,
kind of what the film was saying because I wonder if because there is a moment where this landlord character somebody pulls a knife on him, and it's
yeah, that's
very deserved in that moment, but it's a very clear sort of message that the film is sending where it's not just the characters but it's the film is condemning this character in a way that the film really up until that point and throughout the entire film doesn't condemn the David Thewlis character. It's a
I mean,
very pointed it's a very pointed thing that they're doing to single out this guy. And I wonder if maybe if the film is sort of saying I don't know if the film is calling a duality to the fact that at least the David Thewlis character is honest,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
how I interpreted it.
I think there's
Yeah.
an element to it, and I think the title of the film kind of draws to that. He's sort of bearing him.
Whereas
He's sort of
it's
bearing his soul for better or for worse. While he's
whereas
yeah.
the film is sort of making this statement about the landlord because he's someone who is no better, maybe worse, maybe not, but he's trying to hide behind this sort of posh,
Mm.
persona, this keeping up of appearances. And I think that's an interesting statement for the film to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There,
It's
there, 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 there-
also,
there's a parallel drawn here. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it also seems like with with the parallels between Johnny and the landlord, like the way they treat women, it could be seen as a film about toxic masculinity.
Hmm.
Percent. I mean, it absolutely is. But
I mean, I think that's
there's a Norm Macdonald joke that you often cite, Stephen, that I think applies to the parallels between these two characters.
which is
There's an element we're not discussing here is that like Britain was under like a huge depression around the time the film was made. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people were losing jobs. We saw that to an extent with the Full Monty, but here like we see like everybody's just miserable, everybody's nihilistic, everybody's like as low as you can get. And like this city is like a character in of itself almost, and the setting and the time period is very reflective on the main character and his kind of like nihilistic point
Yeah.
of view. And even the element of like the tenants like literally fucking over their residents is very, symbolic of
And
that, because there were a lot of situations where that sort of thing happened, like not necessarily sexually, but money wise, lots of people clearly couldn't afford like these ridiculous prices for their apartments or their homes, a lot like today. So it's interesting
in
to see that
Canada.
reflected in the movie as well.
oh god,
And that's
and
something
it,
you
it
gotta
just
consider.
yeah, it shows a lot of the societal pressure that existed and the kind of effect it had on people. I mean, I think some of the most memorable stuff in the film. So after Johnny hooks up with the one girl, and then when she starts becoming emotionally attached to him, he starts, getting aggressively detached, and he literally leaves. And he goes on this kind of odyssey where he's running into these different people over the course of a night or a few nights. Um, there's the one Scottish guy who's looking for Maggie.
It's Spud! It's Spud from
Eh,
Train Spotting.
Train spotting.
yeah,
Yeah.
Spud, which is a very memorable scene, and it's really, I don't know,
Really funny
just
scene, yeah.
the way those two communicate with each other and the way he talks above them. Um, there's a lot of frames where David Lewis is like physically taller than a lot of people, but then the way he looks at people, he thinks he's better than them, despite being this low life. And it's that contrast of him feeling intellectually superior, but unable to sort out his own problems, and he's projecting his deep-seated insecurities onto others, which is really fascinating. But then there's
Well,
also the whole scene where he meets up with the security guard, and he just goes on this whole um, conspiratorial rant about the end of the world, which is to me the most memorable piece of dialogue in the whole film, and what really
no, I think it is as
what
well.
really grounds that's really the whole set piece of the film for me.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I was gonna say, I mean, kind of piggybacking off what Ian was saying. I mean, I think this is a much better film than the Full Monty. They're obviously trying to accomplish different things. I mean, they're playing with the same themes, but I think this is probably more honest.
Much
Um,
more honest.
no, and it also, another film that this kind of reminded me of um, was Clive Barker's Hellraiser, um, which is also kind of dealing with this similar theme of repression and this sort of class struggle and Britain at its worst and this sort of side of things that Margaret Thatcher was kind of sweeping under the rug. You know, but that's definitely looking at it through more of a supernatural, allegorical kind of lens, and this is far more grounded. But I think it is. I think it is fascinating, and I love films that transport you to uh, times and places that are so out of what we normally think about our own experience. Um, I've never even been to Britain, so much less during the sort of Thatcher era, and have any experience with that. But I think there is this really deep sort of societal pain and maybe even some shame, that goes along with that. And it's like I think it's really captured beautifully here in a way that is um, that resonates even for people with little experience or knowledge of that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And the writing in particular, I think, is like easily the strongest aspect.
Fantastic.
It's one of those scripts where you wonder like how much of it was improvised and how much of it
A
was
lot of it
written,
was.
because it all feels improvised. Like that's what I was thinking. Like they they must have used like 20 pages from the script because so much of it like feels like so off the wall, so like One thing I liked is like people talking over each other. Like that's not something I see in enough movies because usually it's I say my line, now you say your line. But in this, like people are constantly like interrupting each other, speaking over each other, like trying to yell louder and louder and louder to like be, try and be heard in the middle of a conversation. Like it all just feels so natural and organic, but it also doesn't feel like it's improv city, which some of these films can fall into, where it's like they improv everything, even improv that isn't very good. You can tell it was a great
Oh yeah,
collaborative
but it's
process
like
to keep the
no,
best bits.
the shooting strip for this was only 25 pages long, and a lot of
No
it was
shit.
improvised, and there
Yeah.
was a lot of rehearsal that went into creating, which really adds to the whole naturalistic feel, and I think keeps the ideas fresh and kind of in the same vein. And David Lewis read like Voltaire and Teachings of Buddha, and the Quran and the Bible, and kind of took inspiration from those. And I thought it was really telling once he's kind of at his wits' end, where you know him flaunting his intellect isn't working, and connecting with people. He has that very telling line where it says, "It doesn't matter how many books you read, there are some things you'll just never understand." And all this is all just him talking about himself out loud. Like the things that he criticizes in other people are things he has deep-seated problems with himself, and it's just
Projecting,
the most.
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's a very fascinating like character study. Which when I was a teenager, I related to some of the nihilism and to some of the intellectual stuff, but watching it again, I'm like, okay, he's really just compensating for some deep insecurity. It's not really about what he knows; it's about what he is not properly dealing with.
Yeah, he's very flaccid. Like he says a lot of flowery language, but when you really break it down, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really have anything
No,
to
I mean,
say.
to me,
I think
Like
he's
he's
he's a
hiding
flashy in
behind
more
a
ways than one
facade.
too. Like
Yeah,
he's underperforming. Yeah,
he's a pedantic, pretentious prick. Is I think
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
easiest way to.
There's so many
to put it.
people like this. Like I swear I've met this kind of guy in college, and I'm not saying they've done the horrible acts he's done, but in just the behavior and the I'm better than you mentality and the I read this in a book somewhere, so it must be right kind of nature. I think we've all kind of met like people like that before, and I think that
Oh,
especially made me want to
yeah.
throw like a brick at the TV because it's
oh
just
yeah.
Yep.
so like relatable and
I
human.
definitely went through my pretentious phase as a teenager. I'm
Yeah,
starting to crawl out of that now.
yeah,
Same
good.
here.
Was this movie a
Well,
wake up call?
But it was in a sense. It helped me realize, yeah, I'm not like these people, so I should make sure
Never
I
act
don't
like
end
these
up
people.
like them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like this is where I think the literally me aspect comes in handy, where it's like, okay, where are the thresholds? Like, what parts of these characters can I relate to, and what parts should I not, and what parts should I like distance myself from to, just be a better human being? Because you
well,
see, you
it's
see the
also
thresholds of like, the
you
problems
you
that
kind of brought
man.
up the security guard scene,
Yeah,
and I noticed. I don't know if you guys caught this, but there's a lot of sort of doomsday sort of
prophesizing.
biblical prophesizing and conspiracy theory that the barcodes all have 666 on them, and it's this religious doomsday, and then a half second later he's in another rant, and he's talking about evolution, and he's
And what
talking about
about
when we crawled out of the ocean, and we were frogs, and then we became something else billions of years later, and it just really shows to me, and I have to imagine it was intentional, but I think it shows to me that this guy is completely talking out of his ass. He doesn't even understand half the shit he's saying because
100%.
it's so completely, you can't say that
I
there's
mean,
a
I think
biblical.
I think he's wrestling with these ideas, and it would have dated itself if he absolutely thought that the world would end in '99. He says, well, it may not,
Well,
end, but
no,
it may
no, but
be.
I'm talking about specifically how that he's pulling out of his ass all these biblical sort of Christian doomsday theories, and then in the
and the
same
cross
breath
that and the
with
cross
with
that
with evolution and this sort of atheistic sort of Darwinism, and all of this, it to me that was perfect because it speaks to the fact that this guy has no clue what the fuck he's talking about anything.
Oh yeah,
He
he's
doesn't believe in anything.
it's like he has these deep-seated insecurities. He's looking for answers in these esoteric books, and he's just trying to deal with himself and trying to project kind of
Well,
these
but
things
it's not
otherwise.
just that. It's he might as well be throwing a dart at all of these books and
Yeah.
trying to cobble together
And it's like
theory out of 50 of them. And
he'll vent to literally anybody that will listen. Hence, he's on the streets just talking to anybody about it, just to see what he gets out of those interactions.
Yeah, I love the
Well,
scene where
it's
like
a
one guy
very
was like listening, then he just immediately like walked away. Like, I'm not listening to this fucking guy.
Oh
Are
yeah,
you kidding?
well,
the guy putting up
he's
posters who ends up kicking his ass,
Yeah.
which was great.
he's
Oh,
so antagonistic, and he's just. I
He
mean,
needs to. He has a lot of angry energy that he's clearly just trying to
he
get
has a
out.
bone to pick with the world, and he
Yeah,
will pick on it with anybody that will listen or
but he
anybody
doesn't
that will
know
give him
where
the
to
time of day.
point his finger.
He doesn't know where to find it. He will point his finger everywhere but himself. Um, and also that one scene of him like silhouetted as he's talking about the whole Nostradamus end of the world theory. They did like 26 takes of, but they ended up using one of the earliest takes. So
That's
I
funny.
love the commitment to getting that across anyway. And that was the
well,
scene
and
that really bugged me. Yeah, when I was
supposedly
younger.
even behind the scenes, like Mike Lee had David Thewlis go look at a body in a morgue. They arranged this
Jeez.
because they were like, "Hey, your character is obsessed with death.
Why don't you go
Have you ever
look
seen a
at
dead body?" And he's like, "No." He's
Do
like,
I have
"Okay,
to?
we'll show you one." So,
I mean,
Jeez.
the way he walks around in that very lanky fashion, it is almost like he's a walking corpse.
Yeah, there's a
no,
lot of character and
And
like how the characters move around.
I liked when he's trying to hook up with the one girl that ends up not going well, and really starts to feel his most impotent by the end of it. But it's like he asks her how old she thinks he is, and she says 40, and it's like he's 27.
Yeah, but like,
Which
how
yeah,
can you
so
like
tell?
was that the woman with the skull and crossbones tattoo?
yeah,
Yep.
that is the one thing I'm still wondering about. Like, why did the skull and crossbones tattoo tip him off?
Well, so I was curious about that because at first I mean I didn't think it was like a Nazi gang tattoo or something.
I don't think it is either, but
I don't know what
Do you
the
know her?
significance of that was. They don't really elaborate on it other than
It
just the
might just
fact
be a
that
cultural thing that we don't know about.
maybe he just doesn't like tattoos. No, there's got to be something else to that. I don't know.
Yeah, Aaron, what do you think?
well
The skull and
that was
bones tattoo, like, what do you think that represents? Help us out here.
I think it means like some. I don't know. Like maybe it could represent. Maybe it's like a symbol for some far right wing hate group, and he in his own
I don't think that's what it was though.
I don't
maybe.
either. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
This was maybe my idea. Maybe he's kind of fascinated by these two concepts of beauty and death. The sort of he's a very lustful sort of character, but he's also has this deep seated fascination with the macabre or whatever, and maybe seeing those things together gave him some sort of anxiety. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's some kind of cultural thing or maybe something of its era that we're missing perhaps.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like there's definitely something more there. And if you're listening and you're British,
Please let
I'm
us know,
sorry,
for love of
but
God. The
no,
the film
I'm,
has good
but
filmmaking
yeah,
too. I think
please let us know.
like the
Do what?
filmmaking overall, I think is pretty good too. Like, it's very subtle, but it definitely helps like
Well,
more than like you'd
it,
expect. Like, there's some really great usage of lighting, especially in the opening sequence. Some really impressive long takes. Like, not just like for the actors to pull off all of this dialogue, but to capture so much chaos and it's very well filmed and very well directed, and it's
It
not
is
really
very
noticeable
well.
because it takes a back seat, but it isn't doing nothing while it's sitting comfortably.
Yeah, I mean it's not flashy. It's not in your face. It's going for something
Yeah,
different than
it's doing what
the
it's
last
supposed to.
film we
Yeah.
talked about. But it is there, and it's incredibly competent in what it's doing, and I think it works better for this narrative. I think that it
It
fits
works for the
what it's
story,
doing.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
I was just trying to read some theories on the whole skull and crossbones thing, and I mean, the most I've got really is that it just might have been a bad omen, like it may be connected to the rant that he
Oh,
made earlier, and it just reminded him of death,
just
and it just
paranoid.
made
Yeah.
him kind of recoil and not take advantage of her like he normally does. So it's weird that like that's what stops him from being a rapist, or it's the only time where he starts to act slightly more altruistic, but it's for very selfish reasons. And then he ends up calling her, he has like the most British
Oh,
uh,
the insults. Oh,
line of insults for
you,
her.
Oh yeah,
you fucking
the
mum.
yeah,
So many.
the
Like this movie is
So
just British insult simulator. The movie. Like there's just so
yeah.
many naked insults. Hang on, I gotta look up a few of these. Naked
Well,
movie
so
insults.
it says
so I will tell this story while
Yeah,
we're
okay,
waiting
fine.
on Ian to
I can't
pull that
find it
up.
anyways. Go on.
So my it took me almost 3 days to finish this movie. Not because of content or some kind of moral hang up, but it just I've been incredibly busy lately, and it's been hard to find time to kind of sit down with it. And it was funny because my girlfriend is Irish, and so
mm,
she was saying that she was trying to do me a favor, saving me from the film because it's British. Uh, so, uh, but yeah, no, it's and I mean, thank God we didn't watch that movie together because that's not a great date movie, you know. But uh, but no, it's like I said, I mean, I don't have much more to add. I mean, it's very well done. It's very competently made. It accomplishes what it sets out to do. The performances are brilliant, but
David
I
Thewlis in
don't.
particular is just.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's the breakout star of this for a reason. But the thing that I kind of keep coming back to is I don't know if I ever want to revisit this film. Not because of, its quality or its content. It is just
Personal preference.
it's exhausting to sit through.
Mm.
That's the thing.
It's a
it's
lot.
quite
It's a lot.
bleak,
Yeah.
and I
No,
actually want to say the female characters in this are fantastic. They really do a good job standing up for
Mm-hmm.
oh,
themselves,
and
and I
I
think
will say
I
I
think
will
they're exemplary at showing it how to deal, or at least the one character is how to deal with people who are like this, who are just draining. And
It's a good customer
no,
service movie to watch.
well, here's the thing, because this film was actually accused, I think erroneously, of being misogynistic. That
Boy.
this film's
yeah,
treatment of women is, some reflection on the filmmakers, and
What the
sort of
fuck?
yeah, no, the way that they treat women is somehow problematic. And here's the thing: I think this film is actually secretly an incredibly feminist film because
hmm
the very end of it, the person who finally says what we've all been thinking is the woman at the very end who's like, I can't put up with you people anymore. You are insufferable. You're all the worst. She goes on like this 5 minute rant at the very end of the movie, just telling off everybody and laying it all out as to what she really thinks about all of these
Great
people.
scene. Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's really, it's like the audience is speaking because you've put up with all of these people and you're finally like, yes, I wanted to stand up and fucking clap. This one,
Woo!
thank you.
Yeah, the women are the real heroes of the story. And
Oh no,
I
100%.
think Mike Lee is a
Unironically, I'm
feminist.
like,
Yeah,
fucking
that too.
thank you.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah, I
Holy
just
shit.
well, that kind of mentality is why we don't get films like this, because everybody's too scared to do anything because it could potentially offend people. Like, you shouldn't make art just for other people. Like, you need to make art for yourself as well. You need to make art to express something across, and sometimes you gotta delve into dark places to do that, and people should be allowed to do so without like having
Oh,
to constantly look over their shoulders.
And I think just
I
showing this
agree
in this
wholeheartedly.
refreshingly matter of fact way, and just like there was this one review that really it's a video essay diving into the dangers of fragile narcissism or vulnerable narcissism, where these people are narcissists who are, genuinely going through a hard time and being vulnerable, but they sort of make it your problem that they're having a hard time. And that's definitely a personality to avoid, or really deal with carefully, so you're not roped into their bullshit. But it was this quote saying that this film takes the same mantra as Seinfeld, where there's no hiding, there's no lessons learned. Kind of by the end, I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I was just imagining the end of the film with the Seinfeld theme playing over it.
And you just see a Jerry Seinfeld walk off screen in like a dirty
Just
British
him,
alley,
just
just
him
be like,
hobbling.
"What's the deal with airline food?"
Well, I
Which
mean,
Hey Jerry,
they
gotta
could
get out
do
of Britain.
hey, I mean, they might as well just do a reboot of this and get the guy who played Kramer. Am I right?
And get David
Oh
Thewlis as a guest star.
Oh, hey.
if you recut this film as as a Seinfeld episode, it would be the most nihilistic piece of media ever created.
Did you guys hear that there was like a chat GBT bot that they programmed to do Seinfeld, like AI generated
Yeah,
Seinfeld episodes, and
nothing
it got
forever.
banned from Twitch because it started doing racist or like homophobic jokes or something.
Oh, it switched to a different chatbot, and so it started making trans jokes.
Oh Jesus, yeah, no,
Welcome to
I heard
Twitch.
about that. It's Jesus Christ,
We're getting off topic. What are we gonna rate Naked out of 10?
One more thing I
Uh,
have to say: the music in this is
Oh
fantastic.
God, how did I not mention that? Music is so
That
I
good.
feel so. It's funny because I feel dumb for for not saying that. I remember texting you while I
yes,
was watching it. One of the times that I sat down to watch it,
and I
and
and I
I
felt and
said,
I felt vindicated that
I,
you're liking the music.
I was like, my God, the music in this, it's almost like one little ditty, but they use it so well.
And they mix
Oh
it
yeah.
up in so many different ways too to fit the situation.
It's
It's kind of reminded me of The Long
it is a
Goodbye.
continuous like
Yeah,
motif with like plucked like strings, but it has this like really dark underpinning to it, and they use it in just the right moments to really
heightened.
create a
Yeah,
vibe throughout this whole thing. And it's just, oh
absolutely.
man, it hits. Like you could just listen to the soundtrack of this thing, and you'll be thrown right back into it.
Yeah, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
guys seen The Long Goodbye by Robert Altman, but that also had one song in it, The Long Goodbye. But there'd be a version that's lyrical, there'd be a version that's solely instrumental. Sometimes they'd take out certain instruments, sometimes they'd add certain instruments. And it kind of reminded me of that in a sense, but obviously this is going for something like even more like
It
tragic and
also
dark.
reminded me of the house that Jack built.
Oh
I don't know if
yeah,
any of you
yeah,
guys
that's
have
a good
seen
point.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
They had access to Fame by
Mm.
David by David Bowie, and they use that like 15 times at least, and it always kind of works. It's amazing. I love shit like that though. I love where they're making the most of what they have access to, or going for a specific motif or theme, and it absolutely works here. um yeah, I'm gonna give this a solid 8 out of 10.
Nice.
What would you give it?
I'm gonna push it up a little bit. I was gonna give it a solid 8 as well, but on review, this film hit harder second time watching, and it made me made me really like uh it realize just how limited of a perception I had when I was younger watching this. I mean, I knew what the characters were doing were bad, but goddamn, there are some things I just willingly blocked out at that point because I just didn't know how to process it. But watching it now, it's like, yeah, this is definitely a very good cautionary tale. um,
Yes.
something to avoid and something to be taken very seriously. I'm gonna give it a 9.6.
Ooh,
Oh,
damn.
Yeah.
okay.
Aaron, what would you give it out of 10?
10 out of 10.
Oh,
Really?
shit.
Wow.
Damn.
Jesus.
Um,
All right. You know
yeah.
what? I kind of waffled back and forth. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 9. I think it's earned that.
Yeah, it's like
I
really
mean, hey,
the
you don't
yeah.
have to conform to our ratings, Steven.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Very
Ah,
funny.
boo, but
Mike Lee is. I've only
Boo.
seen one movie of his, and that's this one. And I gotta say that I want to see more of his work.
I mean, even if
I
this was the
I would
only good
agree with
film he
that.
ever
I
made, like what a note to
I,
end
I,
on.
re- I really need to see Secrets and Lies. I remember
Yes.
we saw a clip of one in film class, and it was like the series of like families getting their photograph taken, and you would just see sort of their. It's like you would see their performative expression when getting the photo taken, and
so,
then those smiles would just fade afterwards. I
Mhm.
forget what film
so,
was that. Secret and Lies.
Yeah, that was Six and Lies.
Okay.
Yeah.
so real quick, before Ian gives his rating, I want to talk about Norm Macdonald
Oh,
had a joke on Weekend Update where he was like, "The English Patient, Secrets and Lies." And there was another one, and he was like, "Are all competing at the Academy Awards this month for Best Picture I'm never going to watch."
Oh God.
yeah. He should watch Secrets and Lies though. It's
I
good.
thought you were gonna bring up the date rapist joke. Does that very directly
Oh,
applies
oh,
to this movie?
Yeah.
no, no,
or it
the
could be
date
implies
rapist
English
joke
patient, but
was
anyways.
that at least a date rapist got a date, so he has to be somewhat more charming than a regular rapist.
Jesus Christ.
Oh
I love you,
Christ.
Norm. Rest in peace, buddy.
Uh,
Oh
Really,
God.
the
yes,
only issue
indeed.
I have with
I
this
mean,
movie is that like it's a little too long. Like I feel like you could have
Yeah,
trimmed 15, 20
there.
minutes.
I will say on YouTube right now, which is pretty well flown under the radar, there is a slightly edited down version of this film that
Oh
cuts
shit.
out most of the grape scenes, which for if you want a slightly more enjoyable experience of watching this film, I would recommend.
There you go.
It
yeah.
cuts it cuts
Yeah.
out 4 minutes of very unpleasantness that your imagination can sufficiently
The
fill the void
the
of.
the
The
parts
PG
where
13
the
cut.
guys do the thing that makes them feel like God.
Oh
Um,
fuck.
It
I'm
brings them
gonna stop
closer
with the
Which,
to
you know
the
God.
what?
Norm Macdonald joke.
Honestly, that very much applies as well. Because like the one guy very clearly gets off on making the other person very uncomfortable and hurting them, and it's awful.
It's awful.
Um, the other guy just does it because he doesn't know he's just terrible at it.
This
But
is a
Jesus.
fantastic
yeah,
movie, like incredibly well acted.
this is a
Yeah,
brilliant film about awful people.
it is.
That's
And like
right.
just the improvised dialogue alone, like it's some of the best I've ever put on the
Hmm.
screen. Like I just couldn't believe like how convincing the conversations were, and just how off the wall it felt. And yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. Great movie. Don't know if I like it as much as Secrets and Lies, to be honest. Like I have to rewatch that film to be sure, but damn, what a movie! Fantastic movie. I will never watch again because I value my humanity. A great
It
movie
does have
nonetheless.
that Yorgos Lanthimos kind of vibe to
Dogtooth
it.
vibe, yeah.
Yeah.
I can see
Well,
that.
What about a
speaking of
film that doesn't?
insufferable people,
Yeah, there you go. Devin, take it away.
A film about another film about a insufferable, miserable person. We have uh, Vincent Gallo's debut masterpiece, Buffalo '66. This is a 1998 film, written, directed, and starring Vincent Gallo, um, who is a man who just got out of prison. It opens up with a little bio. His name is Billy Budd, I think is his name, or
Billy Brown.
Billy Brown. It's always it was some alliterative thing anyway. And his dog Bingo. How quaint, how cute. And then there's a beautiful little piece about how much of a sad boy he's been all of his life, and woe is me. Um, really sets the tone.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
it really sets the tone for this film. You get a little montage of
It certainly
um,
says a lot about society.
it's it certainly does. So Vincent Gallo just got out of prison, but there's a problem where he should normally be free. Suddenly he realizes he has to take a piss, which he didn't do when he was back in prison. I
Oh,
guess
Jesus.
I guess he's been holding it for the last 5 years. Um, so there's a whole
Well,
montage of him going around needing to take a piss.
so
Let him
I
finish.
gotta interrupt your introduction here because I watched this with my girlfriend last night,
Oh
and
no!
I
Please
Oh.
tell me
yeah,
how it
no,
went.
exactly, and I told her, like, she looked at me and she was like, "Is a third of this movie just him? He needs to piss?" And I was
Yes.
like, "I
The
did
answer
not
is
even
yes.
remember this
It's
part."
it's just the
But
first 10 minutes of him grabbing his crotch, watching him around, clearly
yes,
calling attention to his greatest asset.
Yeah, I'll mention that in a bit. I have stuff I want to bring up, but carry on, Devin.
I do
Um,
too.
Yeah.
anyway, so there's a problem other than he needs to take a leak. He lied to his parents about the fact that he was in prison. He told them that he was on some secret government job and it was very special, and so he couldn't be in contact with them. Not that they really cared to hear from anyway. But he also lied about the fact that he has a wife, um, which, like any rational person would do, leads him to kidnap Christina Ricci and force her to pretend to be um, his wife. And somehow she goes along with it, somewhat willingly. Um, yeah, that's a bit weird. Anyway, um, this is a film that I remember coming across when I was younger. I don't think I fully watched it at the time, but the premise of it kind of intrigued me, or at least like the filmmaking aspects and the aesthetic presentation of things. I will say, fantastic soundtrack. Anybody that uses like Yes or King Crimson in their soundtrack is that's pretty cool, because that's some genuinely good progressive rock music. And I do like the artistic kind of direction that this film takes. And for films that really dive into the topic of male insecurity, there are very few of them that really get to this like level, and there are depths that Vincent Gall will go to present um, kind of his deeper insecurities through this character. Now, obviously they're exaggerated for um, this film, but you can't help but think that it's pretty close to the truth. That said, I think this guy's a really miserable person, and not someone that I would really connect to. Um, but there is a lot of elements to the performance and what he gets into that I think a lot of guys can relate to. But his character deals with in like the worst possible ways, or some of the worst possible ways. So when it comes to like this film and literally meet characters, some people will bring this up, and I would I would be very sus of people that unironically fully relate to this person. Um, although
No, I mean,
I've noticed some women that have romanticized this character as well, and I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like not
Got
that
into that
far
too.
off from the people that romanticize the Columbine killers. I mean, not it's not quite the same, but mm,
well, here's the thing. Vincent Gallo, what a mad lad.
What is this obsession with his fucking penis? I just gotta get this out of the way. What is this obsession
Okay,
in
all
this
right, we're
movie?
jumping right into
Yeah,
it.
I'm sorry, I can't help
well,
it.
he can't help but bring it up too.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like in
when
this
Well,
movie, like
no,
he's always has to pee. There's a scene where a guy's like, "Wow, you got a big dick," director of the movie, and like we haven't even talked about like the website where he sells weird shit, including, and I quote, "You can have my sperm for $50,000."
well,
I'm
no,
not kidding.
the insemination is $1 million. The one
Also, the
night
price has
only,
gone up
with,
since I last
one
checked.
night
inflation, that's
only
inflation for you.
with Vincent Gallo is 50,000, or you can use him as an escort for the whole weekend for 100. Um,
Price.
Wow.
here's
Was
the
he
thing.
gonna come all the way to Canada? Is that it?
I mean, do you have the money? Is this like a confession right now?
Is this a
No.
scam?
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yes.
But
Here's the thing. So Vincent Gallo made this film. He was primarily he was not really someone who was an actor or really involved in the film industry. I think he had, correct me if I'm wrong, he had like a a non-speaking background part in like Goodfellas or something. Um, so he was
okay.
kind of
Sounds about
he was
right.
just outside of Hollywood. He was primarily known in like the New York art scene. He was like an artist, painter, someone who had a very troubled upbringing and was able to sort of channel that into um, kind of performative, painting and things of that nature. And he was always kind of a brash personality. And he does this, and it becomes this sort of. It was almost like it was like A24 before A24. It was one of those
Yes.
indie
This movie
films.
invented mood lighting. I had
Yeah,
that in my
no,
notes. It invented mood
it was
lighting.
one of those films that just it was an indie little darling that somehow crossed over into mainstream. And he was a very, bold and brash sort of personality.
Bold and
Um,
brash, more like belongs
Go
in the
ahead and make your
trash.
joke. Yeah.
You set it
um,
up perfectly.
yeah, no. And so here's the thing. I, I think this is a brilliant film. Like unironically, I think it's a fantastic film. Um, but
But
I understand this is kind of like we've talked about, Ian. You've talked about greener grass, or
And raw. Yeah.
I've talked about Lars von Trier, where it's like I think this is a brilliant film, but if someone came to me and said, "Yeah, but this, and this," I would get it. You know,
mhm.
I understand there's a lot of things about this film that are far from perfect and certainly rub people the wrong way. And especially knowing what we know now about Vincent Gallo, I think a lot of those criticisms are valid. Um, but there's something here, and maybe he is a one-hit wonder, but it's like I do think that he touched on something here that is really magnificent.
I agree.
There's
I
elements of
would
that.
say
Yeah.
I would also, concede, and I would absolutely agree that this is his one really good movie. And like there's just enough of him being, vulnerable and open about some deep-seated insecurities that I think a lot of guys can relate to, people that have a hard time fitting into like the norm of what you're supposed to feel in a relationship. He just has a lot of like these unchecked aggressions and motivations that kind of counteract his behavior. And he's a very touch and go kind of person, which on the one hand is rather insufferable, but on the other hand, a lot of people can absolutely relate to. Um, the whole incel community, for example. um,
Well, I
I,
don't
I,
know
I,
that
which
I don't know that I would.
I'm not demonizing anybody for relating to this character. I would just be cautious in what ways you relate to him, or I would
No, and
be
I
at least
don't.
critical
I do.
of that to some extent.
No, I do want to just go ahead and throw this out here. I don't relate to this character. I mean, I
Yet,
can't.
I'm proud of you,
I
Steven.
can't. I can't speak for everyone here, but it's like I don't think any of us relate to him in the purest sense of the word. I mean, I
mm,
think.
I think we're all critical of his behavior, but there are elements of what he goes through that I think we find maybe relatable in some regard, but
Yeah.
with a big
Well,
asterisk next to that, because I think he
yeah.
deals with it in some of the worst like ways that you can. Um,
Well, and here's the thing, like you were talking about, Ian, kind of, the whole selling your sperm on the internet, and we didn't even touch upon the sort of uh,
Abrasive.
the nitty gritty of how that he kind of put in there. What was it that he would prefer to sell it to a Jewish woman because it would increase his chances of his offspring getting their movie made.
Oh
This,
God, Roger Ebert didn't like the
yeah,
Brown Bunny, and he called him like a tubby McFat fuck or something like that. Along those
yes.
lines.
Well,
He
okay, so
he
his
called him a
follow up.
fascist pig. Oh yeah, his
Oh,
follow-up film.
oh, that
I think
sounds
his
right.
follow-up film was what really sank his career for
For
good
good reason.
reasons.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about the Brown Bunny, and so it was a follow up film where the whole infamy around for the intense, the sole intention of getting his dick sucked. I will say, Chloe Sevigny was an established actress at that point. She had done some '90s independent stuff. I think by that point, I think she had been in like American Psycho. So it wasn't like this was her first role and he was kind of lording over his influence. I mean, it was consensual.
So you're
But
saying it was a pity blow?
no.
Well,
That's
yeah.
no. I'm saying it was consensual. Everybody knew what they were getting into. They were all adults.
Yeah, so it's a porno.
It's still sus.
People make mistakes.
People make mistakes, and that's not the issue that bugs me about that film. The issue that bugs me about that film is that it's awful. It has nothing to do with.
Yeah, no,
I haven't even seen Brown Bunny. I've been
I
kind of
couldn't
avoiding
finish
it
it.
for the longest time, just
Well,
because of that. Like
well,
this film is decent in that regard. Like in contrast, I
Way
would
more
say.
tasteful, yeah.
Although Christina Ricci was definitely talked into this in some ways and not treated very well, and they
Well,
came
and
out
I
about that
think
after
it's
the fact.
also it's also worth mentioning. I think at the time Christina Ricci was trying to sort of shed the identity of being
like Wednesday Addams. Yeah.
Wednesday Addams, like trying to
Mhm.
grow out of this almost Disney Channel kind of
Vibe,
child
yeah.
star status. Yeah. And so this was a very mature, dark work. And for what it's worth, I think she gives a phenomenal performance.
She's the best actor in the movie, in my opinion.
I think
She's
Vincent
definitely
Gallo is pretty damn good in this.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think she's the most endearing character in the film for sure.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I agree with that too. I don't think Vincent Gallo is bad per se in the film.
No, he's
but
great.
I feel like he's great, but I feel like
he's excellent at playing a misogynistic prick. It's
yeah,
it's almost like
what
yeah,
actually comes down.
yeah, and no, and I get that, but it's also like what I was just gonna say was it's like I don't think this movie works without her.
Nope.
It's like you need
No,
her.
not at all.
Yeah. So no, and it's very indie. It's there's a lot of the cinematography, the technicality, the way that
I do love the artistic direction of it. The way he
Oh,
combines
yes.
different film formats, the music he uses is excellent.
The color
The film
grading
slot
was
they
my
shot
favorite.
in.
There's segments of the film that are shot in like Super 8, and
Oh yeah.
you've got Mickey Rourke, you've got
Yeah, that
Angelica
was
Houston.
Mickey. Holy shit! I didn't notice that
was
first time I
Mickey
watched
Rourke.
it. That's fucking. That's so weird.
No, it's
That's
a phenomenal movie, and it's I don't know, it is. I think the thing that's sad about this is that it is kind of a one-hit thing. Like I wish that Gallo had maybe, I don't know, done something more in this vein throughout his career.
I wish
instead of-
I wish he kept his ego in check going forward, but
Are
Yeah,
you
clearly
saying he
couldn't
had a
keep that.
fragile ego?
Hey,
very
did
much.
the thing.
Hey, I said the thing.
Here's
Well,
the
it's
thing.
No,
Yeah.
it's it's I think this really shows the dangers of vulnerable narcissism. Like he is a narcissist, but he also has in his mind justifiable reasons to be. And
well, yeah, he's
I
got such a huge schlong. Come on, let me tell you about.
Oh yeah, let me just stare at this
I mean,
awkwardly in
the
the
fact that
ballerina
this comes
bathroom.
up. Okay, there is one detail that could have been added to this film, and maybe you could read into this. that it wouldn't justify his behavior, but I think it would explain it better. And just hear me out.
Okay.
If he was assaulted in prison,
Mm.
Go on.
if he had been like assaulted or like sexually like by like the other prisoners, um, after being wrongfully in prison, then I think it would explain why his character is so, uncomfortable and jaded throughout the whole thing, particularly in the bathroom.
Better
Um,
yet,
and
sexually assaulted by a female police guard.
I wouldn't go that far,
Because
but
that
I'm
would
just
tie
saying
into
that
his hatred of women, or his like fake kind of quote unquote hatred
I
of
I
women.
think his I think his hatred of women is more from his mother. I feel like
yeah,
that's
Well, also his
I, I,
ex
I,
girlfriend too.
I think it's that, but also, well, he never really had an ex-girlfriend. He had a childhood crush that he never acted on, which honestly, that element is something I can relate to. There's a lot of people had an interest over the years that I never knew how to act on, and you get hung up over for a much longer period of time than you
Hmm.
should.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
So that is one
yeah.
element that I can um unabashedly relate to. Everything else, not so much.
So
For
yeah,
for good reason. So like at its heart, there is that element to it, and there is when it comes to opening up to other people and being vulnerable, it is a hard thing for a lot of guys. So I think that element of it is what feels the most pure in this film. But it's the narcissism and it's the you know projecting onto others and it's the just being violent and just
Well,
a miserable person
bullying.
around
Yeah.
that he's sort of created this persona to compensate for that I distance myself from him.
well, it's a troubling film, and it's made more troubling by the fact that in the years since there's this element of where does Vincent Gallo begin and Billy Brown end? You know,
There's a lot of
because
overlap, I think, but
I
I
think
Hundred
that's
percent.
the troubling
Yeah.
part.
mhm,
And for what it's worth, I feel like in a way there are moments that I admire his restraint because there's like I was watching this again. Um, this is probably the second or third time I've seen this. And there was a moment where Christina Ricci actually gets a strike in bowling,
mhm,
and for whatever reason, I kept thinking to myself, like, there's no way that he's gonna let her have this. I feel like this is written by someone who probably, maybe
Got
he's
mad about
just
it
doing.
once. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's like, I feel like there's an element to where he's like, maybe I have to include this. Like, I have to, out of necessity, she has to have a little win. Whereas I'm someone who I know if this
begrudgingly.
was, yeah, begrudgingly, right.
Yeah, he's someone with a lot of deep-seated resentments, you can tell.
Well, but I'm talking about behind the camera, like in the writing process. This
Mhm,
feels like it was written by someone who's almost going through story beats in a begrudging sort of way. Like, I don't want to admit my flaws, but
mhm,
I feel like maybe I have to be as honest as I'm being. And I feel like there's probably things that never made it to screen because of
mhm.
that sort of, you know,
But
lying to.
there's also an element that maybe he puts these things there so that you feel more empathy for him, and
Oh, for sure.
there's an
Yeah.
element of manipulation in there that you have to be wary of, because that's what
Oh,
vulnerable narcissists will
definitely.
do is that they might be going through a hard time, but they'll sprinkle in all these things that you should care for them, and they might be things that are well within their control, but they don't do anything about because they won't get the external validation they crave.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I'm fully aware that, in hindsight, yeah, it's manipulative. I mean, there's an argument to be made that, all films are manipulative on some level, but it's
Oh,
like,
they are.
yeah, but just kind of putting that at arm's length. I mean, I do want to stress. I think there's something here, and it's like he was able to touch something to kind of reach down into this sort of Jungian, shadow and manifest it into something very meaningful. And I think it's almost tragic that he never managed to do that again. That he was kind of consumed by that.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I think once the film maybe got like mixed reception, it wasn't quite the validation he was looking for. Like I think he wanted it to be the next Taxi Driver and to be renowned.
well,
Like
and
clearly,
this was the thing. I mean, I was reading. I mean, a lot of the initial reception was fairly positive.
Mhm.
But that's the nature of any piece of art, right? You're putting yourself out there, and people have the right to resonate with it or not. You're not going to win over everyone.
Mhm.
And I feel like maybe that was somehow too much for him to bear, the idea that anyone didn't connect with it. And maybe because it was so personal to him, that sort of added that extra layer of insult to injury.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah,
it's all self-inflicted too in a sense because he doesn't have a good grounding for being content with himself, I suppose. There's
oh, for
always this
sure.
necessity need that permeates, and it's honestly like the more I watch this film, the more I just dislike the guy. Like the first time, I really felt connected to him at first, but like I was watching this while working on the poster, and I've seen it before, so I allowed myself to get a bit distracted. But there are times where he's just like complaining about himself. I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up. I just wasn't in the mood for it
So,
while watching it. So
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 much,
maybe I'm more harsh on it than I normally would be. I'm just being honest with my experience watching it this time.
so much self pity. I mean,
There is.
how
And
about another joke,
and and
Lorraine?
and and I'm resentful that I relate to some of it.
No,
But
no, for sure. And yeah, I mean, but purely, I feel like we're kind of talking around the film. We're talking a lot about Vincent Gallo, and I
mhm.
get that because he is this kind of
I love the
larger
I
than life
no, no,
personality. But
I
it's like
I
the
love
film itself.
stop talking about his dick, stop choking on it. Anyway, no, I love
Jesus.
the ending of it where he goes to the strip club to confront this quarterbacker, and he has this whole fantasy about killing him, and I love the shots that they create of him like frozen in time and the camera kind of orbits around. That was super creative. I love that.
Oh,
But
it's
then it's
brilliant.
all
Yeah.
but then it then reveals it's a fantasy in his head. And then he becomes the most altruistic person at the very end. I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess he saved it for the very end. And suddenly he's starting to act like a decent person, and he's suddenly keeping things in check. Like, okay, we're finally starting to act like a decent human being for once in this whole
Well,
runtime.
I
Um,
interpreted that as very ironic and bittersweet. It's
it is.
it's
It is.
obvious that it's not going to last. I mean, this is a
Oh no, like
manufactured relationship with a woman he kidnapped. This is like Stockholm syndrome.
oh god, it 100% is. The fact that she went along with it as long as she did, there's so many opportunities she had to leave, which leads me to believe this is all
Yeah,
fantasy in his
like he
head.
doesn't have
But
anything on her. Yeah.
I would love to believe as soon as he got back, she was just gone.
That would have made sense.
And he just had to sit with himself and all the horrible shit he's done up to this point. That would be like the really balanced resolve ending for
That
this.
was kind of my
Although
issue with it. Yeah.
it is kind of bittersweet and romantic in a sense, but it is, I think, at that point, from him kidnapping her, this is all a power fantasy in his head, or at least like a. So there's another word to describe what I'm thinking here, but yeah, it's a
Fanny project.
it's yeah, you could say that.
Well, I mean, there's elements of that for sure. I mean,
Hmm.
um, yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of funny because he was compared favorably. Some of the people who enjoyed the film at the time of its release compared him favorably to David Lynch and John Cassavetes.
Mm.
I can
And
see Cassavetes. Yeah.
I can see both of those. It is funny because he later complained because he was like, I don't like either of those directors.
I mean,
Ooh.
and that's the thing with it. He kind of ruins his own reputation a little bit by.
No,
I think he's a little too honest for his own good. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Very much
no,
so. Yeah.
I mean it is sad that he could go from someone who has this very successful, breakout hit, and now he
Kind of.
did a film with the Daily Wire,
Oh
and
yeah, I remember you being real so excited about that, and I watched the live
well,
stream with you.
yeah, no,
But no,
well, okay,
I watched it with you because this was Vincent Gallo's great big return to, I
that's
guess,
what it was hyped up as.
to not Hollywood. They were hyping it up like this guy got unfairly blacklisted. Uh,
Well, it
yeah,
was funny because I
that premise
think
is a bit sus. And his big return to cinema was playing a pedophile. I'm like, wow, how fitting.
no, a meth addicted pedophile.
Oh right,
Um,
of course.
well, it was funny because you had Ben Shapiro of all people, who was like he was blacklisted, just basically because he was Republican, and it's like,
Oh fuck
was
off.
that
No.
all that happened?
Yeah, how about like all the people he pissed off and like it had nothing to do with that?
There's some hope there,
Serious?
is what
Yeah.
that is. That's what the kids call it.
That's
And
straight
no,
copium.
the movie was not very good. It was probably average at best. It's a weird sort of straight to streaming, not quite panic room with a weird God's Not Dead kind of angle forced in. Um,
Oh
I will
yeah,
say he was the best performance out of the whole movie.
which is
Um,
saying something. It's just not saying a lot.
not saying a lot, no.
Yeah.
And it's sad. I mean, and maybe Vincent Gallo is the cautionary tale. You get famous and you make a big movie, and you don't ask a woman to suck your dick live on camera. I don't know. I, there's not a lot to say here. It's a very bare bones independent film. It happens to be incredibly well acted, incredibly well shot. It's very well written in spite of some bizarre choices that are reflective of the person behind the scenes. Um,
Mm.
but it is well made, and it is sad, maybe, just how good it is, and the sort of wasted potential there.
It's great filmmaking applied to a not great personality. And
Yeah.
there's a lot you could say about it, but it also is just like a mouthful, like he imagines his dick is. And anyway,
Jesus Christ.
I'm gonna get off of those jokes because I'm sure.
Well, I do want to
They're getting a little
say
hard to
one
listen to.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of hard to, never mind. I do want to touch on this briefly because I did mention that this is probably the second or third time that I've watched it, and I watched it last night with my girlfriend, and she said something that I thought was very poignant, because right around the time that he beats up a man who he calls an unfortunate term for homosexuals.
Afford.
Yes.
Which they use the same term in Mike Leigh's film, but it's referring to something different.
Yes. A cigarette. He calls him a British cigarette.
Yeah.
And he says, stop looking at my massive schlong, or whatever.
Stop being
And my
gay
girlfriend
about it, yeah.
my girlfriend made the comment, this guy has the audacity to walk around town wearing red high-heeled tennis shoes and beat other people up for acting gay.
There's not a lot of things that Vincent Gallo has, but if there's one thing, it's the audacity.
To quote Roger Ebert, I will one day be Finn, but Vincent Gallo will always be the director of the Brown Bunny.
Yeah, that was a response to when
he's also
when he
the
called him a
director
fascist pig.
of Buffalo 66, though, which
Yeah.
I unironically I think is a great film. I do think it's a masterful film. I think it's, and I don't know how it's so masterful. It's mind-boggling that someone so completely out of touch with themselves and with reality and all of these things could make something to this level. But I think that makes it all the much more fascinating
Well,
and horrific.
it's the lure and it's the danger of vulnerable narcissists, and which he is. I would
And
say
I'm
the
gonna
film
give
on it.
this.
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I'm gonna give this. I'm gonna take your 6.9. I'm gonna give this a 9.6.
Wow. Okay.
And it's probably the only Vincent Gallo film I would ever give that high of a rating. Um,
Yep.
but
Fair enough. Fair enough. I would say the film on itself, I would have given in the past an 8. But the more I learn about Vincent Gallo, the more I just don't like the guy. Um, and it is intriguing because he is a genuinely like he has music as well, and his music is actually pretty decent. I'm like, I've never been, you know, this intrigued and repulsed by a person at the same time. Because
yeah,
as an artist, I respect him as an artist, but just despise him as a person. Um,
yeah.
so the film itself would be an 8. His personality, I would give like a 3, which bounces out to
What would
6.9.
what would you rate his dick though? Would you give it 8 inches because that's what he thinks?
No
Uh,
comment.
I
okay.
give it 2.5
I
inches.
rate it keeping your pants.
I rated Michael Fassbender's was bigger.
Oh,
So I didn't really say my piece on this movie.
Oh yeah, go for it.
yeah.
My
Sorry.
We've
problem.
been talking around you.
It's all right. My problem was, it's not that Vincent Gallo acted in it. He delivers a great, honest performance. It's not that he
Credit
directed
for
it.
it.
There's a lot of great cinematography, some stylistic choices that kind of took me out the experience, but were interesting nonetheless. My problem was that he wrote it. Like, I feel like this movie. I'm gonna say it. I don't care. I'm gonna say it. This movie romanticizes the "I can fix him" culture. Like,
Yes,
I
it
have
does.
so many
100,000%.
problems with the morality in this movie that I just couldn't shake. Like, it
Oh
almost
god.
feels like it's kind of endorsing this kind of behavior. I don't think it's talking
I
against it as much because it's
I
saying like
knew.
all of this awfulness is fine as long as he has like a nice little sweet arc by the end of the movie. But I could not care less, man. I'm sorry. I was so uninvested in these characters, as well acted and as like interestingly performed as they were. And I can't help but feel like this is a thinly veiled Vandy project. Like, not even just the dick stuff, but the fact that he casts himself with like this really hot girl, and the fact that he used this as an excuse to go like, yeah, I was a bad person, but man, like I had some issues growing up. And I'm sure he did, and I feel really bad for it. But I don't know. Something about this film just makes me feel gross inside. And anytime I hear somebody say like it's the most romantic movie ever made, or it's the perfect Valentine's Day movie,
Oh god.
I don't know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
die a little bit inside whenever I hear that, and for that reason, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. I wish I had more time to flesh out my thoughts. Maybe I'll flesh out my thoughts more off the air for you guys if you're interested.
Yes.
It's a very well acted and very well shot. I can fix some porn. There's no sex
No,
in it,
and I
but
mean,
it,
this is kind of what I was talking about, where it's like, it's like I understand all of the criticisms that you guys are saying. Like, I get it. Believe me, I do. It's like there's still something that it's like it's equal parts disgusting and intoxicating, and it's like a train wreck. You can't look away, and
that's true. I was
it's
never
all
bored.
the
I'll give it
more
that.
it's all the more fascinating because this is essentially what his career in film was. Like, this is sort of the the last statement, that he made before, you know,
He kind of fucked himself over.
he fucked himself. Yeah, but it's
His dick was so long he fucked himself with it.
Jesus.
All
No,
right. Jeez.
that's the show, folks. Wow.
He had both heads up his ass.
Oh, he's still getting
Uh,
way up his
how
ass.
do you top that one?
Evan, how do you top that episode?
Ooh, That's a great segue.
Well, Devin, do you want to introduce next week's, or maybe not next week, but certainly next month's
Well, yeah.
episode?
So next month we're going to be entering into Oscar season, which would be really interesting, exciting. We won't be diving into fully Oscar-nominated films, but there is one Oscar-nominated film that I have in mind for the next episode that we do. And this episode is called Musically Inclined, where we're going to be looking at some great films that center around the classical music world. We're going to go all the way back to the classic Amadeus, which
Yes.
I had seen
Ah,
bits of
yes. I'm
over
so
the
happy.
years, but I've never seen the entirety of. But I do have the soundtrack on vinyl. Excellent stuff. So we're finally going to be getting to Amadeus, then an underrated Canadian film by the name Red Violin, which has a surprising cast in it that you may not expect. So I don't want to spoil anything, but I remember watching that when I was in my history class in school, and I'm like, wow, this is a really underrated and overlooked film. So yeah, that's Red Violin from 1998, and then one of the films that's up for Oscar buzz this year, Tar,
Yes.
starring Kate Blanchett.
That's a good one. That's
So
It is Musical
And
March. Next
Musical
time on
March,
the podcast.
classically inclined.
Yes.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy I'm talking about Amadeus. There has not been a classic film I've been putting off to watch more than maybe Casablanca. Amadeus, man. My mom's
I'm
gonna be
sorry.
happy she
Wait.
loves that movie.
Whoa.
I haven't seen
wait.
Amadeus yet.
You haven't seen Casablanca?
I haven't seen that yet either.
Okay.
Tell me about it. I know.
Okay,
I know.
I'm not doing the podcast again until you see fucking Casablanca. Holy shit, man.
Maybe I'll watch it in preparation for the episode, but that's it for
I
First Dates
think
with Moire.
I can't believe we're friends.
To
Oh my
reserve
God.
further judgment, I'm going to wrap up the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Steven, happy late birthday, buddy. And as always,
Thank
is
you.
it first day yet?
Stay tuned for Conan O'Brien. It's been
I'm not doing
real.
the
Thank you for
podcast so
having
you
me.
write a letterbox review for Naked.
I'm not doing the podcast until Steven watches, I don't know, just watch something.